screen. On. Well, it's not working. Ah, right. There we go. Everyone see that?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Hazina. Right. This is my bar mitzvah Sedra, by the way. 35 verses long. I did the whole thing. It's short, but it's very difficult words. Right. Iris, over to you.
Right. The greater part of the Torah reading of Ha'azinu, listen in, consists of a 70-line song delivered by Moses to the people of Israel on the last day of his earthly life. Calling heaven and earth as witnesses, Moses exhorts the people, remember the days of old, consider the years of many generations. Ask your father, and he will recount it to you, your elders, and they will tell you how God found them in a desert land, made them a people, chose them as his own, and bequeathed them a bountiful land. The song also warns against the pitfalls of plenty. Yeshurun grew fat and kicked. You have grown fat, thick, and rotund. He forsook God who made him, and spurned the rock of his salvation, and the terrible calamities that would result, which Moses described as God hiding his face. Yet in the end, he promises, God will avenge the blood of his servants and be reconciled with his people and land. The Parsha concludes with God's instruction to Moses to ascend the summit of Mount Nebo, from which he will behold the promised land before dying on the mountain. For you shall see the land opposite you, but you shall not go there into the land which I give to the children of Israel.
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you. Right, okay, so that's this week's Sedra. Okay, lots of stuff in this week's Sedra. The thing I actually want to focus on, it's probably quite a short share today, by the way, which is fine. We've all got Yom Tov to get ready for, I'm sure. Is the later on in the Sedra, this famous verse, Torah Tivalanu Moshe Morashakilas Yaakov, right? The Torah that Moshe commanded us, the inheritance of the congregation of Jacob, right? Lots of synagogues, shuls called Congregation of Jacob or Beth Jacob, right? Beis Yaakov schools. So let's talk about this inheritance. So nice. Who'd like to tell a story? Who have we got on? Beryl, you can't see the thing, can you?
No, I can't. No, thank
Sorry
you.
about what?
Right. Would you like to read? Debbie, you want to read?
Yeah, okay.
Go.
Once Rabbi Yanai was walking along the way when he met a man who was elegantly dressed. He said to him, will the master be my guest? He replied, as you please. Rabbi Yanai then took him home and questioned him on Bible, but he knew nothing. On Talmud, but he knew nothing. On Agadah, but he knew nothing. Finally, he asked him to say grace after meals. The man, however, replied, yet let Yanai say grace in his house. Rabbi Yanai then said to him, can you repeat what I tell you? And the man answered, yes.
Right, there's another slide. Okay, so he invites this guest. The guest basically knows nothing, doesn't even know how to bench. So Rabbi Yanai says, would you like to bench? He says, no, you lead the benching, right? Let's see what happens next. It's quite shocking.
You want to carry on?
Go on.
Rabbi Yanai then said, say, a dog has eaten Yanai's bread. The guest then rose up, seized Rabbi Yanai, demanding, where is my inheritance that you have and are keeping from me? What inheritance of yours do I have? He replied, the children recite, Moses commanded us the Torah and inheritance of the congregation of Jacob. It is not written congregation of Yanai, but congregation of Jacob.
Right, very bad behavior by this Rabbi Yanai. Right? Guy comes into his house. Imagine the scenario. Someone comes to your house and they don't know how to bench. And you say, do you know how to repeat after me? You say, go on, repeat after me. I am a dumb idiot, basically, right? A dog has eaten Yanai's bread, right? I'm a dog, right? You know, just making fun of him, which is horrible, isn't it? Right? Okay. Anyway, so what does he do? He grabs Rabbi Yanai and says, you stole my heritage. He says, what are you talking about? It says that it's a Moshe Akilas Yaakov. It's a heritage. The Torah is the heritage of the entire congregation of Jacob. It's not your exclusive right. So basically, it's a challenge to him. If I'm ignorant, why aren't you doing more to teach people like me? Right? But it's an interesting thing, and it's quite I mean, I don't know what, I don't know. Rabbi Yanai was obviously a holy rabbi, so you could say this story happened to teach us a lesson. It's definitely not the way you should behave with guests at your table, right? So he sees an elegant stranger. He assumes he must be well educated, takes him home, finds the guy hasn't been to Cheder, doesn't even know benching. Rabbi Yanai looks at him with contempt, but the stranger says with great dignity, listen, instead of dismissing me, why don't you teach me? Right? You have this in, I think in many ways we live in better times as far as general outreach and Jewish education and access to Judaism, but you still have, I mean, Israel's a good example, right? There, for certain religious communities, for their part, are quite happy for them to be the custodians and guardians of the Torah. They don't want to share it with the secular, and plenty of secular people are equally happy to leave the Torah for the Haredi community. And that's not true. It's everyone's Torah. That's why it was given in the desert, so no one could have ownership over it. So this stranger, this guest, was onto a good thing here, right? It's also a very powerful thing to say. If you invite a random stranger home from shul and then you find they don't know how to make Kiddush, and you look at them with disdain, which you shouldn't, they can look back at you and say, well, you clearly know how to make Kiddush. How come you're not helping to educate people like me that don't know? Don't look down your nose at me, help me. So what should Yana have done? He should have said, do you know how to bench? The guy says no. He says, okay, I'm going to say it with you. I'll give you a transliteration. Say as much as you can with me. God understands English as well. It's a beautiful thing that you've come to my house for a meal, instead of basically mocking him. There was a video a few years ago. I found it very disturbing on a number of levels. And it may have been, it showed one side of it. But basically, you have certain communities where people don't have much interaction with the non-Jewish world, and they have disdain for the quote-unquote goyim around them. But obviously, there's one time a year that you need your non-Jewish neighbors, and that's when you come to sell your chametz. So there was a video of a certain Rav, doesn't matter who and where, I'm not entirely sure I know who it was, somewhere in the United States, who was selling the chametz, and he was explaining everything in English. And I don't remember if it was him or if it was other adults present. It was definitely kids who were present, were making funny comments in Yiddish, like derogatory comments in Yiddish, that obviously the non-Jew who was buying the chametz didn't understand, right? Which, number one, is an issur, it's a prohibition in the Torah to curse the deaf, right? Cursing the deaf includes someone who doesn't understand what you're saying. When I was a governor of a school, someone raised an issue once, and I'm sure this is more and more of an issue with the diversity we live in today. Somebody raised the issue that there are a couple of Israeli teachers and they all speak in Ivrit in the staff room. Most people don't understand Ivrit, and it's quite annoying and rude that no one knows what they're saying, and they could be talking about them and so on and so forth. Could everyone be asked to speak in English? I think that's probably a stretch to tell people they have to speak in English, but I get the sentiment. Socially, it's very awkward when you have people speak a language that no one understands. So in this video, you're thinking, this is just, it's a chilul Hashem, even if the guy doesn't know what's going on. It's just so rude. This guy's good enough to sell your chametz to, but you have such disregard for him that you just get the kids to make fun of him in Yiddish because he doesn't understand it, And what message does that give, that the adults were present in the thing? Anyway, I don't know all the details, but it's a similar thing. Don't mock, right? Do something about it. It's not a similar thing, but I'm just talking about people mocking people. Yeah. So it's a very powerful idea in Judaism that the Torah is everyone's heritage. It's as much mine as yours. If somebody is lacking in their Torah knowledge, then that is a collective problem. We've learned sources about this before, haven't we? Where we said that if there are delinquents going around marauding, that word anyone uses nowadays, that the elders of the community have to take responsibility for the poor education that they've given them. Because if they give them a good education, they wouldn't be doing it. First of all, it touches on the idea of Ahavas Israel, of love of fellow Jew, etc. But secondly, it's just a basic principle, of Judaism, that everyone has a right to learn Torah. Torah belongs to everyone. It should be universal. Everyone should be knowledgeable. Everyone should be literate. You had cultures like the Catholic Church where they deliberately kept people in the dark. I think people weren't allowed to own a Bible at one point. Does that sound right?
I think so.
Because they might become too educated. In Judaism, we want people to be educated. We want people, we don't hide anything from people. Knowledge is power. Interesting. Rabbi Sachs points out that in most societies, right, you know, maybe even with Labour now, I don't know, but certainly with the Tories, you always got the sense that it was the, you know, the moneyed classes, the elites that always got the jobs, right, and jobs for the boys and so on. People have been to certain schools and certain universities, right? And Rabbi Sachs makes the point that even anyone ever been to court or
The juror.
or medical language, right, is very flowery. It's all Latin, yeah, right? If somebody says, there's something wrong with your, okay, solar plexus, people probably know what that is, but says, something wrong with your solar plexus. Can you just give it to me in English, please? Stop. Legal language is very flowery, right? Perhaps designed to make sure that only lawyers understand it so that it creates jobs for them. But actually, things can be explained in plain English. It's good for things to be explained in plain English, right? Even the old translations that we used to use, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children. We were using those words long after anyone ever used them in everyday speech. Why did we retain it? It was a certain, what you call in Yiddish, a shtick, a certain sort of veneer that, it should be in this kind of funny language, like Shakespeare. You need someone to explain it to you. And then you'll need a teacher to explain it to you because it's really hard language instead of just translating it into plain English. I'm still old enough to remember when one of the things with Art Scroll was it was written in plain English relative to the singers. Then the singers got better. But we don't believe in the use of, jargon to confound people. We believe in access to knowledge. What is the reason? Because it's go back to the very beginning of our beginnings as a nation, right? What did God say about Avram? Let's see. We've quoted this many times before. Anna, you want to read?
For I have singled him out, that he may instruct his children and his posterity to keep the way of Yehovah by
Sorry,
doing what is
Hashem. Yeah, I don't know why it's come out like that. Yeah.
by doing what is just and right, in order that Hashem may bring about for Abraham what has been promised him.
Right. Keyword here is to instruct, right? So Hebrew says, Leman asher yitzaveh, he will command, he will train his children and his household, it seems to be, that they will follow in the way of the Lord, right? It's all about, we've had this many, many times before. It's about teaching, passing on, training the next generation. It's about education. Somebody asked recently, is there a mitzvah to study Torah, or is it just a good thing to do? I said, of course there is. So we find it in the second paragraph of the Shema. What does it say in the second paragraph of the Shema? Jeff or Brenda, would you like to read?
I think they're here.
Oh, they've gone. Sorry. Right, Iris, we're back to you.
We seem to have started in the middle of a sentence.
Yeah, go on.
And teach them to your children, reciting them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up.
Right. This is the second paragraph. So the first paragraph of Shema says, you shall teach them to your children and speak of them when you rise up and when you lie down. And the second one says you should teach your children at all these times. Right? Second paragraph of Shema.
Rabbi, does that mean that the mitzvah is to teach someone else? The mitzvah is not with the children to learn?
That's a really good question. Is this where we learn the mitzvah of learning Torah? It does say elsewhere that it should be on your lips at all times, and you should. So I think we do find it elsewhere, but no, this is the prime source. You're right. Isn't it interesting? What do we call a wise person in Judaism? We call them a Talmid Chacham. Talmid Chacham means a student of wisdom, or a student of wise men, one who studies wise people, one who studies from wise people. So a wise person in Judaism is not someone who is inherently wise, who's acquired wisdom. It's one who studies.
So the mitzvah is for the children to study, or for anybody to study the Torah as well as to be taught.
I'm just thinking about how it goes.
Well, if you're saying they're called Talmud Hashem, Chacham, that means a person who has studied from wise men, then the mitzvah is then to study as well as to be taught.
Yes.
That's okay. Thank
I
you.
suppose the partial answer to that is that you can teach yourself also. It's like the famous saying, what happens if you do Seder on your own? You can still ask the questions. You ask yourself the questions. The verb of lamed, which means to teach, occurs at least 17 times in the book of Devarim, which is a motif for the whole book. It's about teachings, right? Moshe's teachings, us teaching. Devarim itself is a whole massive, Moshe goes through and restates. It's interesting. So the first time things occur, sometimes they just happen. Like we've got the Ten Commandments and so on. The second time they occur, we've got the history related. If you look in Devarim, it's narrative as well. So you have basically both your history and your actual knowledge sort of combined. Excuse me. Okay.
Are we boring you, Rabbi?
No, I got up at 5:30 to take the boys to the station. Stralik started driving, but he wasn't here today. And then right at the end, we have Hazinu. And what happens in Hazinu? That who does Moshe speak to? Right? He recites the words of this song from beginning to end in the hearing of the whole assembly of Israel. Speaks to everyone, men, women, and children. The importance of education. I think we had Hacker last week in the Parsha. I think we talked about this before. We have this very strange mitzvah of Hakel. It says you gather the men, the women, and the children, and the king reads from the Sefer Torah, right? And it actually says he used to read the whole book of Devarim, right? So the obvious question is, right? If you want everyone to hear the king reading the Torah, don't get all the kids to come, because it's going to be mayhem. Yeah? Have a
But if they behave properly.
Even if they behave properly, the reality is you're going to have X numbers of children. It's going to be noisy. You want to hear. Years ago, we did something, many, many years ago, I think when I first came here. Such a reflection of the times. We had a quiet Megillah reading. Reverend Myers did one. I remember Rob Itzkowitz went, a couple of people went. Then we had like a noisy Megillah reading with a bunch of kids. Now we get fewer kids. But anyway, so we had a quiet Megillah reading, just for those that wanted to actually hear it, like without noise. And then we had like a noisy one. So if you want everyone to hear the king learning, don't invite the kids, have a children's service. No, the men, the women and children had to stand, right? Here also, the whole words of Moshe's song are heard before the whole assembly of Israel. So what do we learn from this? We learn about what they call nowadays immersive Jewish experiences. Sometimes it's about, so little children hearing the Megillah or hearing the Ten Commandments. Yes, if a child is 2, 3, 4, they're not going to appreciate what they're hearing. They're going to appreciate the experience. You give them the experience of hearing the Ten Commandments in shul, surrounded by people, the experience of hearing the Megillah and shouting for Haman. So that in itself is valuable, having the experience, experiencing things. You know, personally, it's interesting. Haley Ace, who came to speak, right, our Israel Shabbos. Don't know how good her Hebrew is. Remember Haley Ace? The pastor that came to speak about Israel, friend of Israel, Christian friend of Israel.
Yeah.
She just posted on Facebook that she went to Slichos in Hampstead with Rabbi Lionel Rosenfeld. He invited her, and she put about how amazing it was and how special it was and so on. She probably actually does speak a bit of Hebrew, but I'm assuming her Hebrew isn't fluent. But she appreciated the majesty of the occasion, right? A person can say, I don't really understand the words, but this is very beautiful, moving song or tune or davening or whatever. So sometimes it's about the experience. A lot of times it's about understanding and learning. Sometimes it's just about the experience. It's about experiencing something, right? Or experiencing something particular context, like with hundreds of people or thousands of people or millions of people, right? Sometimes that's what it's all about. Sometimes it's about the immersive experience. And what is the blessing, the ultimate blessing that Moshe gives to us? Who'd like to read? I think we're back to Debbie, actually.
Okay. This is the blessing that Moses, the man of God, pronounced on the Israelites before his death. Moses commanded us the Torah, an inheritance of the congregation of Jacob.
So there's two key things here. The first is in the previous verse, that the Moshe's song was heard before the entire assembly of Israel, not just the elite, right? But even the working classes and the proletariat and everyone else. And the second point is, what's the blessing he pronounced before his death? That he said this famous line that Moshe gave us a Torah, which is an inheritance of the congregation of Jacob. In other words, every child, Bnei Yisrael, the children of Jacob, are the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. right? It's not the purview of only the scholars or only the rabbis or only the
Why
Orthodox.
was it Jacob and not Abraham?
Father of the 12 tribes. That's where our modern,
Oh, okay.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
We're
Right.
called Bnei Israel, right? We're called the children of Israel, yeah?
Yeah.
I know that has a different meaning now, but originally Bnei Israel is quite literally the children of Jacob, Bnei Israel. But the question could be why it doesn't say congregation of Yisrael rather than Yaakov. But it's interesting. Most people's, I don't remember the reason why. If anyone does, please enlighten me. Most people's names that get changed, they never look back. So Avram becomes Avraham. Yoshua, what does Joshua? He gets a hey, doesn't he, in his name? Sarai becomes Sarah. And the names get changed. But Yaakov and Yisrael were interchangeable, interestingly. So this is what Yanai's guest says to him. He says, look, the egg's on your face. You're a rabbi. You're supposed to be educating people. I walk in here, I'm a Jew, and I don't know how to bench. And you mock me? I should be mocking you. You're not doing your job. Right? I mean, I don't know the context. I'm assuming there was some logic to it. Maybe he lived in his neighborhood, right? It would be akin to my complaining to a member of the congregation that they're not doing enough Jewish learning, and they're saying to me, well, there aren't enough opportunities for X, Y, Z. I want to learn this, I want to learn that. Okay, maybe they might be right. Don't know if they would. I don't know if everyone did the survey for the strategic review. It's an interesting one. The issue I took with it, I said to Laurie, is you're asking people if they think there's enough going on socially or for children or whatever. I said, you then have to ask them really the following questions. He said that what I was saying was too detailed. Do you think there's enough going on for a given age group? Would you attend things for a given age group? And would you organize things for a given age group? These are three very separate questions. If you ask somebody, do you think there's enough going on for toddlers? They'll say no. Okay. But I know, for example, that we tried to start a baby group and people just weren't interested. So the next question is, well, if you said no, would you attend something? And the third question is, would you organize something? So there's a big difference between, being on the sidelines and standing up. But we're completely turning around on its head, right? I'm saying, Yanai was the one at fault here. You've got a guest, you've got a Jew in your town who doesn't know how to read Hebrew. That you should be ashamed of yourself if you're a teacher and a rabbi in that town, right? But like saying, if you have a kid that's failing in school, right? When did you ever hear a teacher say, oh, it's just a bad egg or whatever they say nowadays, rather than saying, why have we failed this child? Right? Why are we failing to get through to this child? We're teachers. We're failing to get through to this child. What are we doing wrong? That's a much harder exercise to undertake. Sometimes the answer is nothing, but often the answer is going to be we could do more. That's what Yanai's guest is saying to him. Right? You should be doing more. Don't mock me for my lack of Jewish knowledge. Why didn't you start a cheder? Why didn't you start an outreach program? Why are you not sharing this with me? So thank God there are many organizations and programs now that do share Jewish knowledge. And there are people thirsting for Jewish knowledge. I just saw a couple of the campus rabbis posted there, how many people they had around their Friday night table. Hundreds in some cases. A friend of ours in Leeds, he said it costs £2,500 a week. They lay on food for 300-400 students. That's about £8-9 a head. That's quite cheap catering. That's like incomprehensible. Now I know it's food. I'm saying people are hungering for Judaism. Right? Can you imagine if they would turn around, someone would say, I want to come Friday night, they turn around and say, well, go buy your own food in the deli. What's in my problem? Why do we do these things? Why do we do Friday night dinners for students? Why do we provide religious services at all, right? Why do we provide things? The answer is because we want people to have opportunities. We try to create opportunities. It's very important. It's a famous thing, that it's much harder to ask ourselves where we failed than to blame the consumer. It's much easier to blame, it's much easier to turn around and say, it's a really sad sign of the times. Oh, and across society, no one's interested in religion. And it's just a sign of the times that Jewish kids also under 40 don't generally join shuls. And it's not just our shul, by the way, it's across the board, On the other hand, the much harder question is, where are we failing? And this is part of the idea of strategic review, hopefully. Where are we failing? What
I don't think it's a question of failing, as you said. I think it's a generational thing.
But what if every single institution, instead of wringing its hands and saying nobody comes to shul, would say, how can we rethink this to attract them and really do it? For example, Danny was telling me about the Kinlos minion that has a role in Kiddush Friday night, right? Now, that's not halachic. You're supposed to dam first and make Kiddush second. It's interesting. Kinlos is a relatively from shul, but obviously the thinking is that this will get people to come to shul and to bring their kids to shul, and apparently it works. It's a great idea. I think it's a fantastic idea. I don't know exactly.
But even when we do a Friday night, it's the same people. We don't get anyone
Correct.
new.
Correct.
People are not, and I've realized, and I've watched over the years, people, okay, you get the people that come anyway, and it's inbred, but the generation only ever needs you if, God forbid, they're getting married, they have a birth, or there's a death. Then they turn to you and say, oh, you know, the shul is fantastic, but they won't follow it through, follow it up.
Right. So what I'm saying is the mantra should be, the answer may be nothing. We have to try. The mantra should be, what can we do? Because there must be a way to get those people involved. There must be a way to.
We know there is. We know that in our area, there is a lot of 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s Jewish people, because we know from the deliveries we do.
Yes. I'll tell you a little secret, by the way. With the exception of maybe one or two large US shuls, this is a US-wide phenomenon.
Yeah.
Even in places like Radler or, you know, I don't know, whatever, Bushy, you know, these problems exist. It's just, but it takes, you know, a school, they have a captive audience of children, right? When does a school teacher ever say, oh, the kids not enjoying my classes? I think I'll rethink my education, because the kids are going to come anyway, right? In a shul or a community, people can vote with their feet. So it's saying it's always much easier to blame the much easier for Yanai to say you're a dog because you can't read Hebrew than to say, how is it possible there's a man in my town that can't read Hebrew? How has this happened? Right? That's a much bigger challenge. But Torah Tzivalanu Moshe Merushakelas Yaakov, it is inheritance of all of us. Right? We've said this before. Universal education is not a given. Now we talk about universal education. Although even now, if anyone remembers the Merkata, which we supported a couple of years ago in Ethiopia, basic education is lacking. Right, but if you go back to, you know, you think of Sound of Music and all those kind of films where they had a governess teaching the kids privately, and then, you know, the working class kids were what? They went down the mines, or they were in workhouses or whatever, you know, I don't know how much of an education they got. Right? The idea of universal education for all is a relatively new phenomenon. It's not so long ago that kids went to work and went down the mines. What, 100 years? I don't know, something like that. How long? Well, kids went out to work in different forms. So the idea of universal education is a new phenomenon, very new phenomenon, but not in Judaism. Judaism, it's basic Torah. Everyone has a right. It's a question.
Do you think it's the rise of Jewish schools for the parents' attitude is, well, the school teaches them everything we need to know.
Possibly.
We don't need the shul.
Possibly. So that's when you talk about education, you have to then define who's responsible for education. Yeah, you know, these are also questions, right? Universal education has many meanings. Cheder wasn't perfect for many people either. Many people hated Cheder, right? Put many people off Judaism. Many Jewish schools don't have the highest standards. It's not black and white by any means.
No, but what I'm saying is it's not the sense to the education.
Right.
It's the parents' attitude. Whereas when I grew up in a non-Jewish school, shul was our focus.
Right.
Socially, educationally, Cheder, that's where we all met.
Right.
Once you have the Jewish schools, educationally, parents think, okay, the school's doing the Jewish education. We don't have to come to shul. We don't need that because our socially, we're meeting fellow Jews at the school.
Yeah, no, there's all these things, definitely. But bottom line, even if you have a Jewish school, if a kid walks in who doesn't know, I always teach a kid from a Jewish school who didn't know what, let's not even go there, he didn't know what Shmiyat Torah was. Now, you would think of all years that even a secular Jewish school would be explaining that Shmiyat Torah is when the massacre took place and so on. So, you know, Jewish schools provide a social environment, but it's not the answer. And the chief
but their parents' attitude is they feel that they've done the right thing by sending them, whether or not they follow what the school teaches.
I think that the level of Jewish studies is very basic in a lot of
It is
places.
very basic, but it's
Um,
something.
Um,
But what I'm saying is the parents' attitude is, oh, it's Shemini Atzeres. Oh, we've got a few days off. Oh, let's
Yes.
go away for a few days.
That's a much bigger piece of work, though, because
Yeah.
obviously the Hasmonean parents are not doing that. Why not? Because they're more committed. So
Yeah, exactly. It's the
there's a whole
commitment.
there's
Yeah.
a whole background. It's easy to lament all those people that went to Center Parks that wouldn't have had a Seder if Ben hadn't been there. But at the end of the day, there's a much bigger background to that as to why that's happening. Again, it's a lack of enthusing about Judaism. It's a lack of enthusiasm and excitement. It's a big mess that needs clearing up. It's not easy. On the other hand, we have more educational outreach institutions than we ever had before. The fact that the US as a synagogue body now recognizes the need for outreach is a good thing. So, it's not all bad. But this point is key. The fact that we have so much in English and we have so much in translation, we have so many things that are explained, and we have art scroll books and all kinds of books and phonetic books and linear books and, teach yourself Hebrew and all these kind of things, and thousands of hours of classes of all levels that a person can educate themselves at home even is phenomenal. You didn't have that years ago. In fact, what we touched on when it said about the translations being archaic, and my father always said he felt growing up there was a sense that the Torah, the Judaism, whatever, was the purview of the clergy and the sort of the elite, and there was almost a conspiracy to keep people in ignorance. So all the books had this old English, if that, or Hebrew. People learned Chumash Rashi. They didn't learn to translate it. They just learned endless Hebrew, and it was all double Dutch to them. Nowadays, thank God, we have much better educational materials. People don't appreciate them. So I think we've come a long way, but I think it's poignant, particularly if you know anything about Israeli society. This is very poignant. The idea that Torah is everyone's heritage, that the guy on the beach on Yom Kippur, eating his whatever pork sandwich has the same stake in the Torah as the chief rabbi sitting in, whatever shul in Yerushalayim. We need to remind ourselves of that. And if the person on the beach is not appreciating his part of the Torah, then we've got work to do, basically. Right, I think that's a good place to end, actually. A bit shorter today, but
sorry.
And this, by the way, is why the very first line that we teach kids is Torah Tivilana Moshe, Moshe Kelas Yaakov. This is a Torah that Moshe taught us, which is the inheritance of the entire nation. It's nobody's exclusive purview. And nobody can say, if somebody says, I have Torah and you don't, then they should be ashamed of that, because then the question is why? Why has that come about, right? One hopes that, we wouldn't boast that one person has running water and another doesn't. We would try to make sure everyone has running water. These are basic things, right? You would be embarrassed if you lived in a society where not every kid could go to school. And if you heard your kid who does go to school saying to a kid who can't afford a school place, I go to school and you don't, you'd say, don't be like that. If anything, it's our problem. We should be asking ourselves why. So it's the same thing with Judaism. So going back to the story, it's an awful story. Obviously comes to teach us something, but I hope nobody would do that. But more importantly, when someone's sitting in my home that lacks Jewish knowledge, I have to ask myself, me particularly as a rabbi, as an educator, what have I done wrong? How has this person managed to exist? They might be living next door to me, even for all I know. But what's gone wrong in the system? These are difficult questions to ask, but we need to remind ourselves it's everyone's heritage. Everyone has a stake in it and a claim to it, even if they don't appreciate it. Right. Hopefully we'll have a share next week. In the meantime, I wish everyone a Shana Tova. Wherever you go, you find very inspiring and uplifting.